There comes a time in every person's life when you realise it's not about doing what you are told, but doing what you know is right for you. Let us take a journey of learning and discovery with the world's most successful people who are living the life of their dreams, walking through life using their inner wisdom and being of service to others. Forget exams, grades and test scores. What is your purpose? As we let go of what we think should be and learn from our elders to gain knowledge, inspiration and a true sense of who we are. What are your dreams? Does your life have meaning? Are you living a life of significance? Let's talk with today's guest. Hello, my name is Mark Taylor and welcome as we spend some more time together on the Learning on Fire podcast. Today I'm talking to Seth Perler. Hi Seth, thanks for joining me and let's explore the journey of who you are.
Hey Mark, thank you for having me.
So let's start with a little bit of history. Obviously people are here from the accent, you're from America, so whereabouts are you living, and give us a bit of background into your sort of education experience there.
My accent, just kidding. Cool. First of all, I want to say thank you for what you do, and thank you for just stepping up in the world and doing something that affects so many people. I really appreciate that you have made the choice to do that to help kids, essentially.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
So my name is Seth Perler, and I live in Boulder, Colorado in the United States, and I am an executive function coach. So basically what that means is that I specialize in working generally with middle, high school, and college students who struggle in school. So they often struggle with things like time management, organization, focus, motivation, procrastination, getting started, getting finished, getting things turned in. And ultimately, their grades are usually suffering as a result of it, and they struggle with this stuff. So that's what I do now, and I also focus on 2E kids, which means that they're twice exceptional. So most of the kids that I work with are gifted and talented in one way or another, but they also have some learning challenge. They may be dyslexic, have Asperger's, ADHD, or have no diagnosis whatsoever, but they are still struggling. And as far as who am I, that I'm a coach, but I was also a school teacher. I taught elementary school, middle school, math, science, social studies, reading, writing. So I taught all subjects, and I also taught various ages. And as a kid, I often talk about this, but as a kid, I was that struggling student. So literally starting in first grade, I started getting teacher reports that said things like daydreams, does not pay attention, isn't trying, lazy, things like that. And I struggled every year until as a student in high school, things got really bad and I couldn't really fake it anymore. When I was younger, I could kind of fake it, but as I got older, I couldn't, and my grades started really suffering. And then I went to college and I failed out of college. And then I went to another college and I almost failed out, but instead I dropped out. And I just really felt hopeless and like I couldn't do school. And I just had no idea what to do. And then I turned my life around, learned how to navigate life a little bit better, ended up going back to school to become a teacher because I do believe in education when done right. And that education is the key to allow us to have as many opportunities as possible and for a great future. So I ended up becoming a teacher, teaching for 12 years, and then leaving teaching to become the coach that I am now and really focus on helping kids who struggle with this stuff so that they can have a great future.
And that sounds really amazing. And I guess that really is, well, I guess it really is, you sort of see both sides of that coin, don't you? Because I was just going to say, your life growing up is different to now, but in some ways it's the same thing. You're just on the different side of the fence. You're now helping and supporting those people, but really from having the experience of doing it. So you must have some kind of empathy there, which really, I guess, puts you in a really strong position for those people you're working with.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like I was born for this. And I feel like my superpower is the empathy, is that I can really sense and feel what my students and the families are going through on a very, very deep level because I was there. And it's so hard and I felt so bad about myself, and I don't want people to feel like that again. And also, as a successful business person, blogger, vlogger, person who runs my own business doing this, I still struggle with the exact same things that I struggled with as a student, except I've learned a better executive function now, and I've learned what works for me, not what my parents think or society thinks, but what works for me so that I can be successful. And I really see that with the kids that, I really sense what they're going through, and I want to help them find their own way. I call it Frankenstudy. We can get to that later maybe, but their own systems that work for them rather than us as adults dictating, oh, you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way. We really need to tune into the individual.
I think that's absolutely key. And what I really love about that is the fact that, in this particular example, we're talking about students who are really struggling specifically with certain areas of their learning. It's not even a general thing about I'm being told I'm supposed to be a doctor or a lawyer and really I'd rather be an artist. We're talking about very specifically, I want to be able to function in a way that enables me to support my schooling in a very sort of clear and straightforward way. And so it's really interesting sort of having had a few of these interviews now about how it really, this idea of being yourself and finding what works for you really does stretch across the entire spectrum of every person, not just one particular niche. And I think that's a really interesting thing, and I think people listening can really identify with that. No matter who you are, it really is about if you can put yourself and think of all these things around school and people that are supporting you as tools and supportive people, then you can find your way to go forward, I think.
Yes.
So you said, school was a struggle, and you were sort of almost faking it for a long time until you sort of really sort of turned it round. But what was valuable about that school experience, even if it wasn't necessarily a positive thing? Was there something valuable that you really learned from that?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I'll talk about, just because I think people can relate to this, but the way that I was sort of faking it is what I would call compensatory strategies. So in my case, the way that I compensated for my weaknesses was that I could sit in the class and half pay attention and learn very quickly. And if there was a test or an exam or a paper that had to be written in class, I could fake it pretty well. I could learn enough to fake it. And what I wasn't good at, though, was I failed most of my classes because I didn't do anything that had to be done out of class. I wasn't disciplined enough to do my homework and to get it turned in. And those types of things are what brought my grades down. And, what was valuable about my school experience, I guess, there were positive things, certainly. But I was always an outside the box kid. I was always the black sheep in my class. So, and I experienced a lot of shame in terms of getting the message, you're lazy, you just must not care about school, you're not trying hard enough, you just need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and work harder. I got all these messages that really I internalized, and I felt like, wow, not like I'm failing, but like I am a failure. I'm going to say that again. I didn't just feel like I was failing. I felt like I was a failure, like I was lazy. And I do not believe that story today. So one of the things that was so valuable about the experience, as I was mentioning before, that it was so valuable that I got to suffer and I got to learn and see these patterns that I see in so many students nowadays through that suffering. But I also, what was valuable with the suffering, and I'm not trying to sound like a victim or blaming or anything, but what was so valuable about it is that I got to have this experience where I really felt very bad about me. And I got to learn that we can completely change our life experience and learn to listen to our own gut and our own conscience. And we can learn to find our own strengths and our own interests and our own gifts, our own talents and our own purpose and our own meaning in life. Even though there's so much pressure from the outside sometimes, that it was so valuable for me to experience that, because I get it. I can see that it doesn't have to be that way, and that if I could do it, anybody can do it. Not easily, and I'm not trying to say that, but that was very important for me to understand.
And I think that's a really great takeaway to have, is the fact that every experience you have is a positive one, depending on how you look at it and how you see it and how you reflect on it as you go through. And I think that's a really valuable thing for us all to understand as we go forward. Which teachers do you remember, and why is that?
Okay, that's a great question. I remember some of the ones that I really liked and some of the ones that I didn't. I'm going to mention one that I didn't first, and then I'll mention a couple that I did. So one of my teachers, I really felt like she hated me. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I have a lot of students now that will say, my teacher hates me, or my teachers hate me, or the school hates me. And I don't think today that she actually hated me, but as a student, I remember her because I felt like she hated me. I felt like I was being not, I was given the short end of the stick, and she was unusually hard on me, and she was not tolerant of me. And she was someone who is a very structured, organized human being, somebody who really didn't get it. It just didn't make any sense to her that I was not compliant with what she was telling me to do. And she had a huge, huge, huge influence on me, because part of the reason I became a teacher was I never wanted anyone to feel like that again. Obviously, I can't change the world like that, but that had a huge impact on me, and really not wanting anyone to suffer like that. So, and the some of the other ones that I remember, one, he was my high school Spanish teacher. I actually failed his class, but I loved this guy. His name was Mr. Gould, and he was one of my high school Spanish teachers. And another one, Mr. Brooks, he was a high school writing teacher. And another one, Miss Agrelo, she was a high school Spanish teacher. These three teachers, and probably others that actually, there's one named Miss Ittenbach. She was a writing teacher. So it's interesting. I mentioned two subjects. One is Spanish. These are four teachers. Two of them were Spanish classes, and two of them were English classes, reading and writing classes. Now, I did not do well in Spanish, but I did feel like a good writer. So that kind of brings up the topic that, sometimes students who, when they're engaged in a topic, they can be more successful in the class. And when they're not interested in a topic, they can be less successful. However, if you have a teacher that cares about you, you can be more successful in a topic you are not interested in, and you can learn to be interested when you have somebody who's really inspiring. Anyhow, these four teachers that I mentioned, the reason that they were so memorable for me is because of one very interesting thing, and that is that they cared about me. Of course, it had to do with the content, it had to do with how into the content they were, how inspiring they were, and all this stuff. But the main reason I remember them is because they cared about me. They accepted me. They made me feel seen. They made me feel heard. They made me feel known. They made me feel understood. They made me feel emotionally safe. They made me feel like I was valuable as a human being, regardless of any of the struggles that I had. They made me feel cared about.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because you often actually think of these things in terms of, this teacher was really important to me, or I really like them because, like you said, I was good at the subject, or they gave me good grades, and you do sort of get that sense sometimes that, oh yes, they were really inspiring. But I think what you've taken us on a journey there is that whole nother level of why that's the case, being seen, being understood, being heard, all of those things, and then you realise that all of these things, and the real talent of teachers, especially when you really need support, is that ability to connect on a level which is above and beyond sort of teacher pupil. It's actually much more on a more human to human level, I think.
It's so simple. And in that, when you put it in those terms, it really is. It's caring about another human being. Teachers choose this profession because they want to make a difference. But a lot of teachers haven't done their own inner work or therapy or whatever they need to do to resolve their own stuff. And that shame and those expectations can sometimes really impact somebody negatively, because they're wanting the student to be something that they aren't, rather than meeting them where they're at. But yes, when you're cared about, in my kids today that I work with, I can see it all the time. The students that I work with, when they know that they're cared about by their teachers, they're going to work harder for that teacher. They're going to give more of themselves. They're going to feel safe enough to take risks in that class to push themselves beyond their comfort zone for their own well-being.
And that's one thing we do know, isn't it? Is that it's outside of your comfort zone when real sort of magic happens and real learning and real growth happens. And the sort of dichotomy is that of course you need to be safe to do that, even though it's such an unsafe place of feeling. And it's you can see why that relationship is so important, because I guess it's a trust, isn't it, that no matter what the outcome, this teacher and this environment's got your back, no matter what you're trying to achieve.
When you feel like that, when you feel like that, those are great words, Mark. When you feel like they've got your back no matter what, you can move mountains.
So who did you admire when you were young?
So I thought about that question in a couple of different ways. As far as the people that I knew, it's a not very open-ended question. As far as the people that I knew in my own personal life, the people that I admired probably were usually somewhat black sheeps themselves, or outside of the box people that I felt accepted by and understood and seen and heard and all that stuff. So I admired people who made me feel valuable and important. I also admired creative types. I loved rock and roll music. The band Kiss was one of my favorites. I had posters of Kiss growing up, and all of these rock and roll bands, Queen and Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix. And so I really admired creative people that I didn't even know, but that were able to affect my life through their art and their creativity. So I definitely admired those type of people. And then the third type of people that I really admired, I think, were I was kind of different as a kid in that I started reading sort of self-helpy books unusually young. So when I was 13 or 14, I read Dr. Wayne Dyer, and I read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So I read these books that were very, very heavy. And I was a sensitive kid. I was a deep kid. To this day, I like depth. I like deep thinking. I like deep feeling. I like introspection and self-reflection and journaling and metacognition and learning and self-awareness type things. But these authors who wrote these books, these quote self-help books that some people may think are cheesy, but these books, they changed my world. They helped me see that these deep thoughts and deep questions that I was having about the world and the meaning of life and existence and humanity and the human experience and the hero's journey and all of these thoughts that I had swirling around in my head, these people had spent time writing books that examined how we can develop greater self-awareness in this world, in this very precious, brief lifetime. How can we get the most out of it? So I would say that, to wrap it up, those are the people that cared about me, the creatives and the musicians and the artists, and then the authors that really dove into the human condition.
And what I find really fascinating is that all of these people had an impact, but in a different way. And I think that's the great thing to take away when we're looking at our own lives, and what's our strength, what are our skills. You said earlier your superpower, because everything that you do when it's authentic can affect people and have an impact on them in a different way. Like I said, from the rock and roll band, which is seems like a stratosphere away from you when you're just in your bedroom listening to them as a youngster, to the intimacy of actually, like you say, reading a book and someone who's literally opening the world from the inside out and exposing you to something which is completely new, but transforming, but also connecting with you in a way that is true. I think especially when it's something like you said with Wayne Dyer and people like that, it just really makes that kind of connection. And so the impact can be either end of the scale. It can be far-reaching, and it can also be intimate at the same time. And as long as it's authentic, I think that really is the way that you make the biggest impact overall.
Yeah, I'd agree. I definitely agree. The authenticity. Yeah, and I think there was as far as the impact, you ask about the word impact, and I think that all of those people, one of the key ways that they all impacted me in my life was that when I was having an internal struggle, when I was down on Seth, when I was hopeless, when I was sad, when I felt horrible about me, when I felt like that loser, that lazy person that couldn't do anything, when I felt like I couldn't achieve my goals, and when I beat myself up, all of those people, the impact that they had on me was that during those dark, difficult, challenging times, they gave me the hope to push that next step, to move forward a little bit, to take a tiny risk, to just say, you know what, maybe I'll figure this out. Maybe things will be okay.
What great words of wisdom there! Just to sort of have that sense that there is another way, or just keep going. I think that's often the case, isn't it? You don't know how close you are to just turning a corner, or having a bit of chink of light coming through that can actually change how you feel about yourself, and therefore from there, how you experience the world around you.
You don't. Yeah, you don't know how close you are to things changing. Yep. It could be right around the corner. It might be a while. At times it is. At times the light at the end of the tunnel feels very far away. But inevitably, if we persist, if we do hold on to that little bit of hope and we keep moving forward, there will come a time when we're out of the tunnel and we look behind us and we say, whoa, I'm not there anymore. I'm in a better place.
And I really hope that these conversations that we're having on the podcast can really shine a light on that, because that's a recurring theme of that. I guess when you're younger, that whole sense of perspective, and you haven't got the experience because your life is limited to the number of years that you've been alive. But just if you can just hear enough of this sort of conversation about the fact that the people that we're talking to, the people that these conversations are coming around, really have had this experience and they're saying the same thing. Hopefully there's a little bit of wisdom there that just gives you that extra strength, just to, if you are struggling, to be able to just really just keep going. And I think that can be as important as anything else you're going to hear on this podcast or any other. To be honest, it really is a key factor, and so often.
Yep, just persist, even if it's a millimeter, even if it's 50 steps forward and 49 steps back.
You're moving in the right direction. That's the key, isn't it?
Yep, it is.
What was the best advice that you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
Consistently, the person that has given me the best advice in the most pivotal years of my life was this old guy named Red. He's now passed on. But one of the things that he said to me, he would kind of give me tough love and tell me the truth, and I did not like it at the time. But I would always walk away from whenever he gave me advice, and I would always ask myself if there was any truth in what he said, even though I may have not liked it at the time. I would always ask myself, was there truth in it? And I would inevitably find that, yes, there was truth in it. He saw me very clearly. And one of the things that he said to me is he sat me down and he pulled out a little piece of yellow paper. And I remember this, and this was many years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. And he drew a picture of a basketball court. He was a big Indiana University basketball fan. And he said, Seth, look at this. This is a basketball court. I'm like, okay. He said, see this? This is where the audience sits. This is where you pay tickets to watch. And this is the court, and this is where people play the game. And I'm like, okay. He's like, life is not a spectator sport. Only a small percentage of people actually get in there and play the game. Get in there and play the game. And that metaphor for me definitely stuck with me. And thinking, you know what? We can live life pretty unconsciously, pretty mindlessly, pretty numb, pretty reactive. We can just kind of do what we've learned and not really question things, and just kind of be a robot and go through life kind of numbing out and just kind of, watching TV or drinking beer all the time or playing video games all the time or doing whatever people do to kind of forget about life and kind of miss out on the fact that life is not a spectator sport. we can get in there and really engage in life, the whole gamut of life, really experience sadness in a good way where we're processing it, really experience even emotions like anger in a good way where we're looking for the messages that anger gives us, really experience joy and happiness and peace in a very, very deep way, not a surfacey way, not just going to just quote have fun, but to really experience the depth of joy that's available to us on a deeper level, on a very real personal level, to really engage in life, not just sort of drift through life. And not, he used to say, don't cope, live. Not to just cope with life, but to live and engage with life, to get in the game, to be a player, to take the risks, to win, to lose, to get hurt, but also to experience, it's not all about that, but to really experience the whole gamut, but really when it's good, to really know how to enjoy it and appreciate it when it's good, and to be grateful for the people that we have in our life, even if they annoy me, even if they get on my nerves. The fact is that the great people in my life give me so much more good than bad. And there are so many wonderful people in my life, and wonderful opportunities and things. And so just to really be alive, not just cope, but to be alive and play the game and not be a spectator.
I can really identify with that, because like you say, it really is easy just to watch everyone else and feel like you've got no control, isn't it? And that's the thing, when you make that decision to be involved, then you have the chance to make a difference, whatever that happens to be. And like you say, sometimes it's tough, and sometimes you have to feel the full force of, in that analogy, being injured as opposed to school in the basket. But all of it's important if you're living it through. And it's certainly one of the things that I've noticed with our children. Sometimes people want to sort of dumb down those emotions, especially if there's, if you're angry or someone's sort of making life uncomfortable for you. But to fully appreciate it and understand it for what it is and live through it is an incredibly powerful thing, I think.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your younger self?
I guess the advice that I give my younger self, I think there would be probably 3 things. Let's see if I can remember them all. One would be, don't be so hard on myself. I beat myself up more than anybody. I held myself back more than anybody. Another thing would be, don't be so resistant. Resistant to asking for help from my parents, from adults, from teachers. Resistant to receiving help. Resistant to journaling, or to taking more time to do my homework, or to study for tests, or to read books, or to do things that were good for myself, to use a planner, to do my schoolwork. So I would say, don't be so resistant. And I guess along the lines of the first one with don't be so hard on myself is to be more kind to myself and more self-caring and more compassionate with myself. And the third one would be to take more risks. Risk developing new relationships with new human beings. Risk letting go of friends that weren't working for me and friends that weren't true friends. Risk doing things that were scary, but that I wanted to do and that I believed in. Today, as an entrepreneur, as my own business, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Mark, with, for example, the podcast. You are risking yourself by making this podcast and putting it out there in front of people all the time, and being vulnerable about who you are and what you care about and showing it to the world. Like, that's a huge risk. I am certain, I'm interested to hear this from you, but I'm certain that you went through times when you clicked publish on those first podcasts, when you were probably terrified. And when you first put up your website and your about page and you were terrified that the world would judge you. Now, one of my biggest keys to success as an entrepreneur is I take tons of risks. I risk making online programs, making videos, making articles, saying my truth about something that people might disagree with and they might not like. I risk putting myself out there. I risk doing what I believe in. And it is scary to this day. And I have failed so many times. If I take 1,000 risks this year in 2018, I might fail 800 times. But those successes, those 200 successes, whether they're big or small, even small successes, matter so much more than the failures. The failures I just learned from. Now I just look at them as learning experiences. They're nothing. I enjoy it. It just gets me closer to success. And the successes feel so meaningful and so rich and so amazing. So I would say to give myself the advice of take more risks, go try stuff, go tell somebody how you really feel about them in a good way or a bad way. Go get a job and get fired. Go get a job and succeed. Go try to start a little business. Go start a business and watch it fail. Go start another one and watch it succeed. It doesn't matter. Just keep trying. It's kind of like the basketball game and getting engaged in life. Just go play the game, take risks, try things. I'm not saying stupid risks or foolish risks or risks that are self-harming, or risks that are going to potentially get you in trouble or things like that. But I'm saying consciously take calculated risks that are beyond your comfort zone, that are going to push you, and that may work and they may not work. But don't be attached to whether or not they work. Go try it out and see what you're made of. That's what I would tell myself.
I think that's great advice. And I think one thing I'd like to add to that is the fact that it's also a habit, isn't it, in some ways? Because
yes.
like you said, you get into that sense of, failing isn't failing when it's a positive learning experience. And like you said, those when you first set up anything, you're thinking everyone's looking at it, everyone's judging you. But actually what you're doing is judging yourself most. And actually, do your best work, do what you think is right, put yourself out there authentically, and then just see what happens. And because there is no perfect, because I know, having gone through this cycle quite a few times now, what I think is the right thing to do or the perfect thing or what I think is pushing me now is going to be very different in 6 months' time. So actually just doing it, just putting it out there, seeing what happens, and then you're going to move on, whether it was a success or not, because that goalpost is going to change for you, and that particular learning curve is going to change each time you do something new anyway.
Yep. I say the same thing. I say that I'm a different person every 6 months. Yep. And they're both habits. I can be in the habit of limiting beliefs where I believe that I can't do it. This is too hard. This is stupid. I don't want to try. Why even give it the effort? And then I can be in the habit of, you know what? Just do it. Let's see what happens. But you're right. They are both habits.
And I think it also sort of stems back a little bit to, like you said, about that kind of just doing it a little bit, anything is a positive one in the right direction. So, even if you want to just push yourself a little bit, just write that one extra part of a blog or something, or just make that comment to someone which you think is important, and it just pushes that boundary a little bit. But it does, just like you say, it creates that positive habit and just opens a world that you can't quite know what you're stepping into until you actually see it and start to part the curtains enough to start to step inside, and then just allow it to happen. And I think that's a really key thing as well. Just it needs those positive things, and until you take those risks, you don't know what that world is beyond there.
Yep. And it's all about the baby steps. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yes. Absolutely true. What does your future look like?
My future. Well, I'm spending more time in Hawaii on the beach, getting away from technology. My future, I guess there are these different levels of it in terms of my day-to-day life. Hopefully my future looks happy and healthy and filled with the most important thing in the world, which is family and friends that are important to me, spending quality time with people I care about. So hopefully my future is filled with more and more and more of that, of great relationships with people I care about. But I also see my future as being able to get better and better and better at doing my mission, which is serving kids, which is helping students self-actualize and make their empowering kids to overcome their struggles so that they can make their own, as Steve Jobs said, make their own dent in the universe, so that they get engaged in the game of life, so that they take the risks and they can achieve their goals and dreams. So getting better and better at that. I see that as my future, but also it's not for me just about serving the students that I work with or the families that follow my blog or podcast that I'm on or my videos or anything, but it's also about affecting change in education as a whole. One of my biggest goals that the reason that I do what I do is because I want to change education. I believe in education. I believe that a good education is the key to being able to create a great future. However, when you have school systems that do not recognize neurodiversity and executive function struggles and some of the emotional struggles and things that our kids are dealing with. And when sometimes the system or families don't have the tools or the knowledge or the know-how to be able to empower these kids to create a great future, then what we have is we have kids who grow up and who don't self-actualize and who get into problems with addictions or problems with relationships and unhealthy relationships or problems with doing jobs or careers that they don't even like or care about or don't matter to them. They don't have choices. They don't have freedom. They aren't able to achieve their potential. So part of what my future looks like is hopefully being able to influence and affect change in terms of how people perceive education as a whole, and hopefully empowering people to make different choices to better educate people so that the systems work better and provide students more with what they need so that they really can really write their own scripts in life and really craft a great future.
That really is a great thing to aim for, and well, I know you're achieving it, and with some of the great work that you're doing, and it's that exact reason that this podcast network exists. You know, it's that kind of a podcast which can show some of the great, inspiring, creative stuff that's happening in schools already on the Educational File podcast, and then within that, whether you've got a great school or not, there's that personal journey that we're going on as students and parents, for that matter, which this podcast actually is able to identify and help you with as well, and on that sort of bigger level, my latest podcast, which is for the National Association for Primary Education, you know, I know today they've been talking to government about various things that are going through the education system, and they've been asked to comment on that. So this sort of collaboration with all of these different areas, they all touch our lives in different ways, but I think we have a chance to make change just by doing those little things as they come by, and just sharing these messages and sharing our journeys with everyone. What podcast, book, video, film, song, or what resource has had the biggest impact on your life, and why was that?
Okay, so as far as what podcast, book, video, film, song, or other thing that has had a big impact on my life, I'm going to mention a few here that happened at a pivotal time in my life. But basically, for me, I have always loved song lyrics. They've had a huge impact on me. A lot of books have had a huge impact on me. For example, The Hobbit, that of Mice and Men, like these were just, I'm the Wayne Dyer and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on Death and Dying. Like these have had huge influences. But I will say that one resource that has had the biggest impact on my life would be there's this guy, and his name is Seth Godin. He's a blogger and a writer, and he's all over YouTube. You can find him. But what happened to me, Mark, was that I was a teacher for 12 years. And as a teacher, I felt very limited in the sense that I felt I didn't have anything to fall back on. And once I became frustrated with the system where I didn't feel like I could do what I was there to do, where I couldn't serve students the way I felt like I needed to, I felt like, what can I do? And I had this crazy idea of starting this blog and starting this business and really serving the kids, the struggling students that I love helping. I like complicated human beings. That is my thing. I really enjoy helping people decode their brains and figure out how to navigate life. and I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know how to do any of it, and I was terrified, Mark, as I'm sure you probably have been with your podcast and stuff. But I really didn't know if I could do it, and I found Seth Godin, and I started reading his blog religiously and watching videos of him and reading his books and stuff. And what I really learned from Seth Godin was very, very, very reaffirming and very pivotal, was that if I do what I believe I should do, and what I believed I should do was focus on service, focus on helping human beings in the way that I believe I was meant to. If I focus on generosity and giving, and I create a business based on that, and I don't do any sleazy sale tactics, which is very hard to get that message. But Seth Godin is actually like, look, just be authentic, make something awesome, offer it to people, be helpful, be generous, be kind, put yourself out there, make a ruckus is something that he often says. He really, really affirmed for me. Yes, Seth, keep, just like what I told you before with my, the people who really encouraged me with their art and had an impact. He had this impact on, look, just keep trying to serve, keep trying to give, keep trying to be generous, keep trying to run a business that you believe in, the way you believe in doing it. And I would hear all kinds of messages from the internet or from marketers and from people, and and I would see all these sleazy advertisements, and I hate that stuff. And it was so refreshing to know that I didn't ever have to do any of that I could really build something where I'm trying to be helpful, and I could also make a living doing what I love and what I'm passionate about. So I guess that's the resource that I want to mention to you. There are lots of books and podcasts. I'm not going to mention specific ones, but because there are just so many. But he always says the same thing, that it's in different ways, and he just really makes it applicable to any type of human being who is looking for inspiration.
And I really like that. Like I say, it's about that connection, isn't it? When someone speaks to you, and when they're speaking to the world, but at the same time they really connect with you. And just so that you know, all these resources are going to be on the show notes, so you'll be able to click through and have links to all these things, and we'll find some links to the book, but also some of the great videos in that. There's a TED Talk, isn't there? I believe that.
He's got
very good,
a couple of TED Talks, and one of them is called, I think it's called Stop Stealing Dreams, and it's all about education.
So that's perfect, and that just really resonate with so many people when they watch that, especially for the people listening here. So that's a great one, and as I said, they'll be on the show notes, so you can just click straight through. Well, it's been a great conversation, Seth. I've really, really enjoyed it. You've given us so much value. And if people want to find out any more about you, what's the best way for them to get in contact and discover the rest of the Seth Perler that we haven't managed to discuss yet?
Yeah, awesome. Again, Mark, thank you for stepping up and for just making a choice to do this. I know you didn't have to do this, and you created this thing that helps people. And I love when people step up. It's just one of the most inspiring things to me. They can find me on my website. It is sethperler.com, SETHPERLER.com. And on my blog, if you sign up on the homepage, I send out a free course, the Student Success Toolkit, where I send out a course that helps students figure out some really unconventional ideas about how to deal with the resistance and how to feel more successful, less stressed out, happier in life and in school. And I also have a course called UGYG, which is a semester-long course for students and parents. There's actually a huge parent module with about 20 different in-depth parent lessons for how to help your child. And I go through all of my methods of how I help students transform their lives. Yeah, and that's the resource, sethperler.com. I have an exhaustive blog. I'm also on YouTube, Seth Perler on YouTube, and I have a ton of in-depth videos on YouTube where I explore all kinds of relevant topics here.
Thank you, Seth, for sharing your wisdom and allowing us to learn from your experiences.
You're so welcome. Thank you all.
Thanks for listening to the Learning on Fire podcast. For more information, please visit educationonfire.com and follow the links from the homepage. This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.